Hello everyone, and welcome to the 6th lesson in the Android Development Fundamentals series here on the AcademiCode channel. Today we're going to be introducing intents, and this will be the last major component that we talk about before jumping into a series review. And at that point I feel we'll have a very solid understanding on how to make a basic Android application. More specifically, we're going to start by reviewing the definition of an intent, as we always do, and then we're going to talk about what implicit intents are and what explicit intents are, and then we're going to wrap up by using extras to package additional information into our intents to send that between our activities, and we'll go into more detail later on in this episode here. So first, what is an intent? And again, if you go to the developer SDK, you're going to see that an intent is described as an abstract description of an operation to be performed. So as I mentioned previously in the first video in this series, an intent in Android is very similar to an intent in real life. The analogy I made is if you're going to switch lanes on a highway, you first want to broadcast that intent so that the operation of switching lanes is handled more appropriately. So in Android, an intent is really just a way of saying I want to do this action, and this action can be defined specifically or abstract. So you can say I just want to send data and let the system resolve it with implicit intents. Or you can say, I want to perform this task by starting this activity, and be very explicit with your use of intent. So it's very flexible, and the reason it's there is because the devices are interacting with human beings, so it has to be able to handle the ambiguity of human interaction. So I use these words very frequently in my definition there. Implicit versus explicit tense. Let's talk about the differences. Explicit intents will execute a specific activity to complete a task, and you as a developer have to say which activity that's going to be. So yes, this is how you transition between activities in your application. The example I always go to, if you're on the menu screen or if you're on the login screen and you click login, you're going to launch an intent to start the main menu screen, which is the next screen in your logical application progression of activities. And you're going to do that using explicit intents, because you really don't want the system to guess how to handle the request of switching activities, because you know exactly how it's going to happen. You're just going to take the button click and display the new activity, assuming the user logs in appropriately. So we'll go through an example of that later in this video. But I also want to make sure we understand what an implicit intent is, and it's the more confusing of the pair. Essentially, an implicit intent is where you as a developer say that when a user clicks on some widget on your screen or performs some action, you want to complete a more abstract task, and you want the Android operating system or the user to figure out how to complete that task. So that's quite a confusing definition, but just understand that it's more abstract, and we're going to go into a more specific detail here. So the simplest case, explicit intents. We've got this button down here, next activity, which is going to use intents to launch another activity. So we'll click it and we'll see this is a new activity pop up. Now the more complex of the two scenarios using implicit intents on the right here is we have some text that we're going to send in some way. So the prompt's asking us, what do you want us to send? We'll say hello world, and then we'll click send. Now we've only specified to the system that we want to send text data. We haven't told it anything else, so the system therefore prompts us, how do we want to resolve it? Well, we're going to use the messaging application in this scenario. And you'll see that the messenger pops up with hello world already populated in the body of the SMS message that we're about to send. So implicit intents are a really powerful tool for working with human beings and getting a direct, discrete result from an ambiguous input. So now that we've kind of seen what these intents look like, I want to jump into Eclipse so we can get an understanding of how we actually make those intents happen behind the scenes. So as you can see, I've made a new project here, Understanding Intents, and we're going to go ahead and implement a simple application where we're going to switch between activities using intents and then also send some text data using implicit intents. So in the interest of time, I went ahead and made a lot of the boilerplate code for us in advance. So I have two activities, main and next, and I've also made two associated layout files, main and next.xml. This is what we're going to be doing. We're going to have this first main activity where a user will type a message, then they'll tap the button to preview the message. A dialog activity is going to pop up with the message there and the option to send it. It's going to look like this here. And then when the user taps the send button, it's going to send that message using whatever medium they prefer. So let's go ahead and code the functionality that we're going to use to switch between these two classes, main and next.java, using intents. And that will inherently switch between main and next.xml because those XML layouts represent the content view of that activity. So we'll come into main.java. I've associated all the views with their correct XML components in advance for simplicity. And we've been over this in the previous lesson, so it should be fresh in your mind. But now I'm going to create a new intent to explicitly say I want to switch to the next activity when this button is clicked, which in this case is referred to by next, but it's actually the preview message button in our application. So we'll go ahead and make a new intent. Just use the basic constructor here. And we want to pass in the context of our activity. So main.this. Remember that activities themselves are associated with a context. And the class that we want to switch to is next.class. Then we have a convenience method in the activity class called startActivity. And we simply pass in an intent. So it's that simple. And now when we run our application, we will see that when we click on the button, we now switch between the activities. So as you can see in the emulator here, preview message will bring us into this new activity where we can see our message in the default text right now. It's also important to note that this won't work if we don't update our manifest to include the second activity, or really any activity when you want to make a new one. So as you can see here, I've added in the package name and the class name for the activity so that the application knows that there is another activity, and this is how it accesses the Java code associated with that activity. So always update your manifest when you're making a new activity. But this is how we switch between two activities. It's fairly straightforward. But now we also have the message on this first screen. So as you can see in the emulator down here, we have a prompt to type your message. And I now want to make sure that that message gets carried along into the new activity. And I'm going to do this by using what's known as extras. Extras are really just a way to, well, pass extra information, package extra information into an intent so that we can pass it along with that intent to be used in other activities or elsewhere in your application. So as you would probably assume, the method to put an extra into an intent is called putExtra. And you'll see we have two parameters here, the first one always being a string name, and the other one being some other type of object. And that's because it's kind of like a key value pair mapping that you would use in, say, hash maps if you ever had experience with them. We're mapping the extra that we place into the intent with this string key, and we're going to use that same key to retrieve it later in some other place, be it in the other activity we use it or somewhere else in the application where the intent is retrieved again. So we need a key that we can refer to in both activities. And when we need something like this, it's common practice in Android application development to use a public static final variable. Here I've made one called data tag. So I'll go ahead and type that in here. And the value that we want to place in this extra is the extract of the text from the edit text field. So we'll say et.getText. And of course that returns the editable, so we have to call toString as well. And now we've put an extra into the intent, started the intent. Now we need to retrieve this intent in the activity that we're switching to. As you saw here, we're switching to next.java by passing in the class file associated with next.java. So we'll open that up. And here we have all of the UI components for the screen next.java. We have the button that sends the message and the message itself. So this is the message in the middle, and here's the button that sends the message. So we need to set the text of this message. We'll call message.setText. We get the option to pass in a character sequence, which again could be a string. But this time we'll call getIntent. And then inside the intent, we have the extras. So we'll say get extras, and then that returns all the extras. We want to get a string because we passed the string that was typed in by the user into the intent as a string extra, and the string key that represents that extra is packaged inside the main class. It's called data tag. We just made that. And now that we've set the text, if we run the application now, we will see that when we type something into this message, into the edit text here, such as hello, and click preview message, the new activity is going to pop up, but this time we'll have the message we typed there as the message text in the middle. So up until now, we've been exclusively using explicit intents, and we've been successfully switching between activities using those intents. We're telling the system I want to go to main.java, and we do that and we get to the next activity. But now we want to use implicit intents because we want to just send this text data in some way. We don't want to specify exactly how we want to handle it. We want the user to choose how they want to send the data. So we'll do that using implicit intents. Now we're going to go ahead and make a new intent. There is no different class for implicit intents. It's just a different implementation. But I'll name this implicit intent so it's a little more clear. And when we're making this intent, we have to specify the action that we want to accomplish with this intent, and it's packaged inside the intent class. If you want to find all of these actions, you can either inspect them here or have a look at the documentation on developer.android.com. So we have action, and we want to send data. And then we also want to put the extra text that we just passed from the previous activity into this intent as well, because we want that information to carry itself out of the application as well. So we'll say implicit intent.put extra, and we'll do the same, but this time we have to put the key which is packaged inside the intent class itself, extra text, because we have to align with some sort of standard so that the Android system knows where to find our text and it knows the key name. So we just use the one inside the intent class itself. The value is just going to be message.getText, and we'll do toString on that because again we just specified, or we just set the text of the message text view immediately before this click listener here. And then we want to set the type of data that's inside this implicit intent. And this is kind of counterintuitive, but it's necessary to align with some standards we have called MIME types, and I'll actually put a link to some explanations of what a MIME type is here, but we're setting the type here to text plain. That's just some plain text, so that the system knows, okay, I need to find an application that can send plain text. What plain text are we sending? This plain text. So now that we've kind of created the intent, we now need to make a chooser, which is going to let the user pick between applications to use to send our data. So in order to do that, we need to make another intent, because we're launching another activity essentially to choose between the applications to use. And it's going to be called chooser intent. Gets intent.create chooser. We use a really nice factory method for this. The target is implicit intent, because that's the intent we want to resolve. And the title, let's just say we want to say choose an application. And then we do the same convenience method again, start activity, and we want to pass in chooser intent because we want to launch the chooser, which is then going to launch implicit intent, which is going to launch some other activity to some other application to handle a request. So when we run the application again, we'll be able to input some text in the field here. Let's put hello in again. Well, let's put hello world. And we'll preview the message first. It says hello world, good. I want to send this. So we'll have the chooser prompt us to select which application we want to use. We want to take the messaging application as our resolver here. We see we have the body of the message populated with the text hello world, and we can clearly type in who we want to send the message to now. And that's really all I wanted to cover in this lesson here. We've been over everything from understanding how to use explicit intents to implicit intents, how to package extra information to use between intents when you're switching activities or even applications. And you're probably discovering now that intents are an extremely useful part of the Android programming suite. You really want to get a firm grasp on them if you're going to be developing successful applications going forward. And the next lesson is just going to be a review of the series where we're going to just develop a really simple application from start to finish using everything we've learned so far, just to reaffirm that we have a solid understanding of the foundations here. And then we'll go from there. But I want to thank you again for watching, everyone. Really appreciate all the feedback I'm getting. If you would like to suggest something for a future video, please do so in the comments section. And if you'd like to see more of these, feel free to subscribe. But that's it for now, everyone. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next video.